Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a truly fascinating concept today, one that really challenges our everyday understanding of cause and effect. Imagine just for a moment creatures that are genetically identical, raised in exactly the same conditions, yet they turn out completely different chalk and cheese. You know, we're exploring Michael Blastland's The Hidden Half, a brilliant look at how life often conceals its most potent influences.
Yeah, what's really intriguing here is how we're often sort of wired to seek out these big, sweeping explanations for everything. Is it nature or nurture? Big policies are really obvious reasons. But what if the truly significant forces are far more elusive, almost invisible? What if the noise we try so hard to screen out is actually the signal?
That's such a crucial distinction, isn't it? This deep dive is all about revealing those subtle, hidden influences that so often defy our expectations, even when we think we've accounted for, well, everything. As we unpack this, you might find your understanding of how the world works, and maybe even how you make decisions, starting to shift a bit. Start with an almost unbelievable biological mystery. The marmor crabs, the marbled crayfish. Now, these aren't just any crayfish,
No, they're special because they reproduce unisexually through parthenogenesis.
meaning all the offspring are genetic clones of the mother. Basically, yeah, asexual reproduction.
Yeah.
So researchers quickly realized, hang on, this is an ideal subject for that classic nature versus nurture debate.
So they isolated these creatures, meticulously creating two laboratory lineages, A and B, and they controlled every single influence they could think of on their development. Same food, tetrawafer mix, apparently. Same room temperature tap water, checked constantly for disease, even the same person examining them. The aim was to just eliminate every possible variation, make it as uniform as humanly possible.
Okay, so here's where it gets truly remarkable. You expect them to be, well, identical, right? Genetically identical in an identical environment.
Exactly. But when they looked at a batch of eggs from the same mother, one crayfish grew to be 20 times the weight of another.
20 times, wow.
Yeah, and they had different feeding habits. They molted at different times. They even developed social hierarchies. Some were dominant, some submissive. They were just completely different.
Chalk and cheese, like you said.
Totally. It really pushes us to rethink what control even means, doesn't it? If identical crayfish are so unpredictable, what does that imply for, say, human development? The researchers were basically left scratching their heads, calling this elusive factor intangible variation, or maybe developmental noise.
Developmental noise.
It suggests this powerful but hidden third influence that keeps acting throughout life, as if the tiniest random nudges kind of feedback and amplify, creating these really idiosyncratic paths. It highlights that the noise isn't just interference, it's an active, unpredictable force of change itself.
So you might be thinking, okay, weird crayfish, fine, but surely human lives are different, more predictable. Let's put that to the test. Think of Mike Tyson, the boxer. His early life filled with brutality, a father who fled, a violent mother. You might assume history is destiny there, right? A clear cause and effect. But this is exactly where that hidden half shows its hand.
Indeed. Because Mike Tyson's brother, Ronnie Tyson, he became a specialist surgical assistant, patching up crime victims in Los Angeles. Same extreme beginning, vastly different paths. It's not just a challenge to our neat little stories. It really highlights that countless unseen, intangible variations at critical moments can subtly nudge lives onto wildly different tracks. It just defies simplistic cause and effect.
So what does this tell us about understanding human development more broadly? Well, there was this deep dive into the longest life course study of criminal behavior.
The Gluck study, later Lobb and Sampson.
Right. And they found that even with masses and masses of data, they simply couldn't predict from childhood whether a delinquent boy would become a criminal adult. Their conclusion, pretty stark. Childhood is not a destiny.
Yeah, and their term for what shapes these unexpected paths is situated choice. It's like a highly particular turning point that blends unpredictable individual experience with the larger social context. You see it with Leon, whose turning point was meeting his future wife, or Henry, whose second attempt at joining the Marines saved him, or even just a simple rebuke like, you quit, you leave. These aren't grand preordained decisions. They're often subtle, almost enigmatic moments where influences and impulses just combine.
Okay, let's shrink the space for differences even further. Identical twins, same genes, same family, same school, same neighborhood. If one twin has schizophrenia, what's the likelihood the other one will?
You'd think intuitively close to 100%, right? If it's purely genetic.
Yeah, exactly.
But the answer is actually about 50%. Which tells us genes are undeniably important, sure, but that 50% difference, it's profoundly baffling. What explains that? You get into ideas like non-shared environment, or maybe innate but not genetic variations, like the developing brain's sort of erratic efforts to follow genetic instructions, may be influenced by tiny, almost imperceptible details. A minute change in temperature during fetal development, perhaps. It's like that saying, you can't bake the same cake twice.
It's remarkable to think about. Even conjoined twins who share almost everything, Abigail and Brittany Hensel, or Lala and Ladan Bijani.
Who tragically died attempting separation because they crave their own individuality.
Even they show distinct preferences and traits. It really highlights Judith Rich Harris's concept of context-specific learning, where we adapt our behavior subtly to different situations, different people. It shows how even in the closest possible proximity, individual paths just diverge.
And this even extends to our own bodies. The risk of cancer in one breast is surprisingly similar to the risk in a stranger's breast, not its twin breast, despite sharing the same genes and history. This enigmatic variation, as Blastland calls it, suggests causes can act right down at the cellular level. It really highlights the role of what some people just call sheer luck. It's like there's this unpredictable, almost chaotic force dancing across every rule, just creating difference.
So far, we've looked at biology and individual development. But these subtle, unpredictable forces aren't just biological. They shape much grander narratives, even historical turning points. Take Charles Darwin. His whole career, the theory of evolution, it hinged on him getting on the Beagle.
Right, a pivotal moment.
And he himself said it depended on so small a circumstance as my uncle offering to drive me 30 miles. And get this, and on such a trifle as the shape of my nose. The captain almost rejected him based purely on physiognomy, his nose shape.
It's incredible. A key takeaway here is how often these critical but hidden details, like a tiny pebble dropped in life's pond, can create a whole forest of consequence. Think about Winnie Langley, who smoked for 93 years and lived to 103.
An outlier for sure.
Definitely. George Davy Smith had this thought experiment. Imagine a postman delivering a parcel. A sudden blast of cold air makes her cough, maybe dislodging some cancerous cells, just days before they would have properly taken root. It's the idea that something intangible, some tiny incidental detail, might have saved her. Pure chance, maybe.
So if our lives are shaped by such fleeting forces, these tiny moments, what about our beliefs and choices? We tend to think our core values are deep, stable, consistently held, don't we?
Well, Nick Chater, professor of behavioral science, he argues the exact opposite. He says the mind is flat.
Flat.
Yeah, flat. Meaning our preferences or desires are kind of illusory, continually being reinvented. We often invent the rationale after we make a choice, not before. That rich, consistent inner mental world we imagine. It's actually a story we're inventing moment by moment.
Wow, that's really something to consider. And this concept gets even more mind-bending when you look at the experiments. In one for a BBC Radio 4 program, people were asked their political priorities. Then they were shown doctored answers, the exact opposite of what they'd just chosen.
And what happened?
A staggering 75% fell for it. They didn't notice. And then they proceeded to justify the reversed position, the one they didn't actually choose, without any sense of contradiction. They were effectively making up their minds right there on the spot, powerfully influenced by the immediate circumstantial clue they were given.
That really stands out, doesn't it? How many contradictory beliefs we actually carry around. And maybe consistency is often overrated. Helen Miller from the Institute for Fiscal Studies showed how opinions on tax fairness shifted dramatically just based on which selective yet true statistics were presented. Our views can be surprisingly fickle, really dependent on the information at our fingertips at that particular moment.
And this inconsistency isn't always, bad or irrational. Think about surfers against sewage. They brave dangerous waves, strong currents, high-risk stuff. But they're terrified of sewage.
Right.
Is that high risk or low risk? It's contextually subtle, but it makes perfect sense. It shows how our attitudes to risk are justifiably tailored by other hidden factors, maybe a sense of control or personal choice involved.
Which raises another important question. Is good a stable attribute? Like being a good surgeon, there was this skilled surgeon whose patient mortality rate was 5 times higher in one hospital than another, even after adjusting for how sick the patients were.
5 times. How?
Well, it wasn't just the surgeon. It wasn't just the hospital in isolation. It was the combination, the unique fit of that particular surgeon with that specific team in that hospital. And that combination, that synergy, it doesn't necessarily travel. And neither does the knowledge of exactly how to replicate it somewhere else.
That inherent lack of generalizability. It plagues businesses too. Wesfarmers, this hugely successful Australian DIY company, they bought the UK chain Homebase.
Okay.
They operated on the assumption, if it works in Australia, it'll work elsewhere. Logical,
Yeah.
maybe. But it was a colossal loss of $1 billion down the drain.
Ouch. Why?
Turns out Brits simply preferred soft furnishings over, quote, a macho culture of big Barbies and power tools. A subtle yet critical cultural difference they missed. The hidden half strikes again.
It perfectly illustrates the weakest link principle. You see it in aid programs, too. In Tamil Nadu, giving food and information to expectant mothers dramatically cut infant malnourishment. Great success.
That's good.
But when they tried the exact same program in Bangladesh, it failed completely. Why? One single hidden detail in that culture. Mothers-in-law often controlled the food distribution within the family. The aid didn't account for that crucial cultural nuance. It just takes one hidden detail, one overlooked link in the chain to wreck the whole plan.
And even in highly controlled science, things go wrong. John Crabbe's mouse experiments designed to be identical across 3 different labs.
Super controlled, right?
Supposedly. Identical mouse strains, same enclosures, bedding, light, food, everything. But they got startlingly different results for cocaine response in the mice across the labs. They literally couldn't control all the intangible micro details. Maybe tiny differences in air pressure, or noise levels, or even the scent of the handler. Who knows? It's almost impossible to replicate perfectly.
And this leads us to a really crucial point, what's often called the research credibility crisis. Glenn Begley at the biotech company Amgen, he tried to replicate 53 landmark cancer research findings published in top journals.
Okay, 53 studies. How many did they replicate?
Only 6.
6 out of 53.
6. That means nearly 90% of these peer-reviewed findings from leading labs simply couldn't be reproduced when they tried it.
That's shocking. Begley's bombshell, they called it. Why does this happen?
Blastland points to a culture that sometimes promotes impact over substance, prioritizing flashy findings over the dull but necessary confirmatory work. And what about studies that find no effect? They often just disappear. They don't get published or cited. So inconclusive results end up looking like undisputed facts.
Right.
It's what some call the garden of forking paths, where researchers might consciously or unconsciously choose the specific analysis that gets them a publishable finding, rather than necessarily the most robust truth.
And this applies more broadly too, right? Like GDP estimates.
Absolutely. GDP figures are highly uncertain. The initial numbers often change dramatically later on, yet you see politicians and commentators confidently making sweeping causal inferences from them.
Yeah.
But error is erratic, as Blastland puts it. Focusing only on the average error doesn't capture the potential for these big unseen misses.
And those lessons from history we rely on, often just as unreliable.
Very often. There's the doctrine of the searing memory, showing how policies based on past crises, say, the unemployment of the 1930s or the inflation of the 1970s, can inadvertently contribute to new crises, like the 2008 financial crash. What was right then might be precisely wrong now because the hidden context has changed. This is where we hit what Blastland calls true uncertainty, a state where we're just basically pig ignorant about the real underlying causes.
Okay, let's talk probability then. We tend to assume if something is high risk for a whole population, it means it's high risk for us individually. But this is where that big knowledge and our small personal realities really clash.
Yeah, this is a key takeaway. You can have certainty about probabilities at a large scale, but that can coexist with deep ignorance at the individual level. Take bacon and colorectal cancer. A 20% increased rate sounds pretty big, right?
Yeah, it definitely makes you pause.
But on a human scale, what does it mean? It translates to about 1 extra case of cancer in 100 people who eat a lot of bacon over their lifetime, compared to those who eat little. And then you have Susanna Machat Jones, who ate 4 strips of bacon every day and lived to be almost 117.
So the population risk doesn't tell you much about her specific risk.
Exactly. Or ibuprofen reportedly increases heart attack risk by 30%. Scary headline. But on a human scale, it means maybe 1 extra heart attack in about 32,000 people over 50 who take the painkillers for a month. We wouldn't have a clue who that one person would be. And here's the kicker. Most people are actually low risk, but low risk spread across a large number of people still generates more total cases than high risk concentrated in a few. The hidden half plays tricks with our intuition about risk.
And this predictive weakness extends to medical treatments too.
Hugely. While drugs are proven to work on average for a population, that's how they get approved the numbers needed to treat, or NNTs.
Meaning how many people you have to treat for one person to actually benefit.
Precisely. Those NNTs can be astonishingly high. For Humira, a top-selling arthritis drug, Typically, 3 out of 4 patients see no noticeable positive effect.
3 out of 4.
Yep. For Nexium, a popular heartburn drug, maybe 24 out of 25 people who take it might be disappointed with the result compared to a placebo. We might treat 20 people with a drug to save 1 life, but the hidden half means we still don't know which one of those 20 will be the one saved.
And screening for diseases like dementia.
Yeah.
Even with accurate tests, that can be tricky too.
It can actually be harmful medicine, potentially. Because dementia has a low base rate, it's not that common in, say, 65-year-olds, maybe about 6%. So even a test that's pretty accurate, say it finds 4 out of the 6 real cases in 100 people, it will also mistakenly suspect maybe 23 out of the 94 healthy people, which means in that scenario, 23 out of the 27 people who get a positive diagnosis would actually be false positives. The hidden low base rate completely skews the results for individuals. It causes a lot of unnecessary anxiety.
Okay, so what about big dramatic events? Things everyone sees.
Yeah.
The Fukushima nuclear meltdown, for example.
Perfect example.
Some saw it as the ultimate proof that nuclear power is just catastrophically dangerous. End of story. Others looked at the exact same event and saw clear evidence of extraordinary safety. A plant got hit by a massive tsunami and an earthquake, yet nobody died directly from the radiation release.
So why such wildly different interpretations of the same event?
That's the question.
It's because big events aren't isolated points. Their meaning is hidden in this whole tangle of contextually varied associations, history, national identity, hopes, fears, everything. Germany, maybe with its memory of total war, viewed nuclear power with deep suspicion. France, perhaps remembering occupation, saw it as a symbol of national independence. The bigger the event, the more contestable its implications become because that hidden context drives how we interpret it.
Or take the UK's teenage pregnancy rate. It almost halved in just 8 years. Huge, sudden change.
Massive drop.
Yet despite months of research, nobody could identify a single big cause. Was it a specific government strategy? Better sex education, new contraceptives, kids staying in school longer, changing youth attitudes, or maybe even, bizarrely, the influence of the Vicky Pollard character from the TV show Little Britain, making teen pregnancy seem uncool.
Who knows?
Exactly. It's just an inconclusive mess of multiple hidden influences.
And this is why the biggest successes can often be the least instructive, paradoxically. Honda's amazing penetration of the U.S. motorcycle market in the 1960s went from 0 to 50% market share.
Wow.
Yeah, but even after decades of study, there's no clear single cause. It was likely a unique combination of dozens of small hidden influences all happening to align. Or think about Leicester City Football Club, 5,000 to 1 outsiders winning the Premier League. Incredible story. But their hero manager got sacked the very next season when their form dipped. Exceptional success often requires exceptional circumstances and, well, a high level of noise elements that are almost impossible to replicate or even fully understand afterwards.
And that big picture data often hides the critical local ground truth, doesn't it? Andy Haldane from the Bank of England noted how the big economic recovery data just didn't match the micro stories he heard.
Like in Nottingham.
Yeah, like in Nottingham, where charities were giving sleeping bags to young men living rough and disused garages. Those My GDP voices, the people feeling left behind by the averages, they became politically decisive in things like Brexit and Trump's election. It shows how aggregated data can completely miss the crucial hidden realities on the ground.
So, okay, if life is this complex, this full of hidden variables and noise, how do we cope? What do we actually do?
That's the key question.
Well, the first step seems to be acknowledging our limitations, really embracing a certain humility. Orazio Atanasiou's work on getting toilets built in India shows this causal intricacy, even for seemingly simple goals. Just giving money for toilets didn't work initially. People bought other things. It took a combination of build first rules and education to get the toilets built, but then...
Did people actually use them? And
Yeah.
did it improve health?
Exactly. That's another whole layer of hidden detail, another link in the chain that can derail even well-intentioned plans.
So we need a more prosaic method, as the book calls it, a more practical, everyday approach.
Yeah, basically. Test, learn, adapt. Experimentation and policy, like trying out different messages to encourage organ donation, can give you immediate useful feedback on what actually works in this specific context. And things like natural experiments, studying populations with genetic variations that stop them metabolizing alcohol, for instance, can reveal insights about alcohol's effects on mortality, even though we can't ethically do controlled trials on humans.
And the idea of triangulation.
Right. Instead of desperately trying to find the one single cause, you look at problems from multiple angles using different methods in different contexts. You see if the findings hold up, if they're robust across these different views. It's kind of how science is meant to operate, really. It helps us cope with life's profound subtlety by acknowledging there isn't always one simple answer waiting to be found.
So ultimately, our knowledge is often just, well, a bet. Admitting that, especially in business or politics, it helps us prepare for the potential downsides, right? It reduces that dangerous overconfidence. Confidence, it turns out, doesn't always equal competence, especially when that hidden half is always at play.
And what's fascinating here is that while you might think admitting uncertainty would erode authority, there's emerging evidence suggesting that being honest about the limits of the data actually makes people more trusting of the messenger, not less.
That's interesting. And finally, we can use stories. Stories aren't templates, they're not rigid rules for the future, but they do hint at limitations. They serve as a kind of reproof to the temptation to extend our knowledge too far. They can furnish the imagination with an alternative to order or control by showing how that unpredictable hidden half with its disruptive particles of experience can turn a whole story on a pinhead.
Yeah, we need to treasure your exceptions. Those outliers, those weird results, they're like the rough brickwork of a growing building, telling us there's more going on, more to learn. They challenge our neat assumptions and invite a deeper and, frankly, more humble understanding of how the world truly works.
What a deep dive. Okay, so you now have a unique shortcut, hopefully, to understanding why the world is often far messier and more unpredictable than our confident narratives tend to suggest. From the individuality of cloned crayfish to the shifting sands of global politics, that hidden half is constantly at play, shaping outcomes in ways we rarely see or understand.
And what really stands out about all this, I think, is that it's not about being defeatist. It's not throwing your hands up. It's about cultivating what Blastland calls constructive humility. Because when you truly recognize the limits of what you know, that very ignorance, that acceptance of uncertainty, it can become a source of freedom, maybe even hope.
Think about it. If childhood isn't destiny, then every moment, every situated choice holds new possibilities. It's a call to be rigorous in our thinking, yes, but also maybe to chill a little, relax. You are not the master of a world that can turn causes on a pinhead. It's not entirely in your hands or even just in your head. It's out there in that half beyond your dominion. It will do what it will do, and you might never fully know why. So here's something to chew on. Given all we've discussed about this hidden half, about how the biggest events are often the least understood causally, what does that really mean for our individual pursuit of control, or for our collective attempts to learn from history's biggest triumphs and tragedies? How do we learn when the causes themselves might remain forever hidden?